Hello everyone, Ushanka Show and Comrade Sergei Sputnikov is back in the house to tell you more about life in the Soviet Union. In today's video, I'll tell you about my experience of going into the Soviet-era college. In summer of 1988, I became a student of Kyivsky Polytechnic Institute, Kyiv Polytechnical Institute. In modern-day Ukraine, this place is called National Technical University of Ukraine, Igor Sikorsky Kyiv Polytechnical Institute. And I had to look it up. The name was changed in 1995, so 4 years after Ukraine became independent, they changed the name from Kyiv Polytechnical Institute into National Technical University. And just in case if you don't know, Igor Sikorsky was a Russian-American aviation pioneer who designed helicopters and fixed-winged aircraft, and he happened to attend Kyiv Polytechnical Institute back in 1907. But before we talk about my personal experience of getting into a Soviet college, and once again happened in 1988, we need to talk about Soviet education big picture. And if you ask any fan of the Soviet Union, in the West they usually called tankies, and in the East they usually called sovkadrochery, about the greatest achievements of the USSR, they will tell you free housing, free healthcare, and free education. And the statement about free housing is not correct. I made already quite a few videos on this topic. We had so-called kvartplata, so it's apartment payment, and it was based on the square meters of your apartment. So housing was cheap, but it was not free. Healthcare was free, but Soviet people knew that if you want to get your best free healthcare, you better bring some money or presents to a doctor. But if we talk about free education in the Soviet Union, the situation actually it's even more complicated because education in the Soviet Union was not always free. For quite a long time, and to be exact, from October of 1940 till June of 1956, so for 16 years, Soviet people had to pay for their education. And not only for the college education. During those 16 years, Soviet parents had to pay for their kids' high school education, although we never called it high school, but after 7th grade, if you want your kid to continue going to school, so 8th, 9th, and 10th grades, parents had to pay money. And let's take a look at the dates again. So Executive Order number 638, Постановление номер 638, was issued in October of 1940. Who was the leader of the Soviet Union at that time? Comrade Stalin. And it was cancelled in June of 1956, 3 years after the death of Stalin. So Nikita Khrushchev returned free education to the Soviet people. And here's the real kicker. So Western tankies and Eastern sovkadrochery, people who love Comrade Stalin and who love to talk about free education in the Soviet Union, they either don't know or they don't want to talk about it, that it was Comrade Stalin who took away free education from the Soviet people for 16 years. And that it was Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader that tankies and sovkadrochery blame for destroying the Soviet Union. He was the guy who returned free education to the people of the USSR. So once again, it's Executive Order number 638 or Постановление номер 638 from October of 1940. That's when Soviet people were required to pay 200 rubles per year for every year of the high school. So it's 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, and 400 rubles per year to go to college. The average salary of the city worker was approximately 350 rubles per month. So it's not that much, right? You get 350 rubles per month and you have to pay for your kid 200 rubles per year, college 400 rubles. But if you had several kids, then it probably will be becoming slightly challenging. And when it came to the people from the villages, they were forced into collective farms, and collective farms didn't pay pretty much any money for their workers, so those kids had no chance to attend not even colleges, even high school. Fun fact, the Executive Order number 638 mentions the reason why the Soviet government decided to take away free education for their people. It begins with the words «Учитывая возросший уровень материального благосостояния трудящихся», considering the increased level of material well-being of workers. So here you go. you guys are doing so great financially, we need to take away your free education. While researching for this topic, I stumbled upon the argument which sounds like this. Look at the date. It's October 1940. The flames of the World War II already engulfed the Western Europe. So Soviet government needed all the money, all the resources they could get to build up their military, to build new defense lines, because they knew that war is coming. And I guess I could buy that, but why would government say that we want to do this because of increased level of material well-being of the workers? There was no secret to say, hey, look at the West. There's the flames of World War II. And we need to be ready. And I believe Soviet workers would understand why would Soviet government lie and come up with this increased level of material well-being. They could just tell the truth, right? And the second part of the argument is even more interesting. How come Comrade Stalin knew in October of 1940 that war is coming, but then in June of 1941 he was totally not ready, not prepared, and not expecting Hitler to attack, so it makes no sense. Anyway, we need to move on with this topic, but if you ever got into argument about free education in the Soviet Union, here you go. Executive Order number 638, between October of 1940 and June 1956, we had only paid education in the Soviet Union, and to make matters even worse, during Stalin's 30 years at the helm, so between 1923 and 1953, for 13 years, so almost a half of his rule, education was not free in the Soviet Union. But before we continue, I would like to ask you one simple question. What is the difference between free education and free healthcare in the Soviet Union? And the difference is quite simple. Everyone can take advantage of the free healthcare. You feel sick, you go and use the services of the doctors. But not everyone could take advantage of free college education. Only smart people could go to college because we had entry exams, entry tests, and if you didn't score good enough, you wouldn't be accepted. I just realized I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video that I have a separate playlist called Soviet Education, where I went in excruciating detail about my experience starting from nursery, kindergarten, every school year. I showed my day planners and all the way to the 10th grade. So if you missed it somehow, they'll be in the comment section below this video. You can get into that playlist and start from the beginning. So let's cover some basics. In the Soviet Union, during my day, so it's 1970s, 1980s, every kid was required to finish at least 8 years of school. 8 years of Soviet school was called неполное среднее образование, so it's like incomplete middle education, and from there you could go and work at the factory, you can go to trade school, PTU, professional technical college, or technicum, technical college, or you can continue your education and go to, let's call it Soviet high school, for another 2 years. And I want to remind you that Soviet pupils, Soviet students had to go to school 6 days a week, so every day but Sunday, but we had to go to school only for 10 years, not 11 or 12 like here in America. So during the 8th grade, there'll be teacher's job during parents-teachers conferences, and those we had, all parents were together in one room, the whole class. And the teacher will tell every parent, I think your kid should stop his education after this year of the 8th grade, and then you decide if he goes to work or he goes some technical school. And then smartest kids, then teacher would suggest he should stay in school, get complete middle education, законченное среднее образование, and then they can go to college, go to university or institute. So the basic requirement to be accepted into the college was either 10 years of school, so completed middle education, or incomplete middle education, 8 years plus the trade school. There were 3 ways you could attend the college. Normal standard way, so-called дневное обучение, so day classes. Then вечернее обучение, evening classes, and then заочное, so that's by mail, and periodically need to show up at college to pass the test. Day classes, дневное обучение, had an age limit up to 35 years old, so you couldn't go there if you're older than 35. Now, evening classes or male was no age limit. So once again, since 1956, college education in the Soviet Union was free again, and we were actually free to choose where we want to go. There was no government control, so it was up to a person. So you make your mind or based on the profession that you want to learn. So if you want to be a teacher or you want to be a cosmonaut, right? Or a seaman. And of course, if you live in a big city like Kyiv, like I did, I had quite a few colleges to choose from. Now, if you lived in a village or in a small town, then you had to go and pick a college in the largest city or anywhere else. Back in the Soviet day, we didn't use the word college. We used university or institute. I cannot tell you why. I thought university is more like humanitarian type of education. So, if you want to be a teacher or historian or journalist, then you go to university. Then we had a separate institutes like for teachers, Pedagogiczny Institute, and then for doctors, Медицинский Institute, and technical education. If you want to become an engineer, then also you attend institute. So I went to Kyiv Polytechnic Institute because I didn't want to be an electronical engineer, but I had to. I'll tell you about it a little bit later. We used quite heavily abbreviation ВУЗ, Высшее учебное заведение, so it's a higher educational enterprise. So universities and institutes were ВУЗ. So once you decided which college you want to attend, you have to get some documents together in order to apply. Looking back, I wish my parents participated more in my decision of choosing a college because I should go for journalism. I always kept the diary since I was like 10. I wrote my first fairy tale when I was 11, and I wrote it and I made illustrations. I wrote articles, stories. So it looks like I should be a writer, but I wasn't brave enough to think about trying to go for journalism because I knew there's a lot of competition. So when I was about to finish high school, so that's we're talking about spring of 1988, I had no idea what to do next. I knew I need to go to college because I was one of the smart kids, but my parents never pushed me in any direction. I really didn't have any real passion, and I didn't think about journalism that time. Besides, I always liked doing it. So I listened to my cousin Tanya, who said, be the best if you don't know what to do to be close to food production. If you be close to food, you'll be doing fine in the Soviet Union. And looking at the statistics of my YouTube channel, where 95% of my viewers are male, I had to admit that Tanya was correct. I could be a great sausage engineer. So let's talk about required documents. So first of all, you need to write заявление на имя ректора. I even don't know how to translate it. So you just write by hand to the rector of that college, institute, or university that would like to be a student in that specific college. Then also you need to bring your diploma from high school, or as I said, your diploma from 8 years in school, unfinished middle education, plus your technical school diploma. It should be originals. Then you have to bring характеристика для поступления в ВУЗ. It's another one hard to translate. So it's a paper that's written by your teacher in school. So that's like a paper about your character, how good you are as a person, and all that stuff, or from your place of work if you work somewhere. So that's like a recommendation that describes your best qualities, характеристика. Another interesting document you had to supply was medical form number 286. So the медицинская справка. So that's the list, your eyesight, your general health, your weight. So they'll see that you're healthy enough to be a student. And 4 pictures of your face. And that medical form, медицинская справка number 286, that would change my life forever. And I cannot tell you in a good way or bad way, but that medical form is the reason why I got education as electrical engineer, not the sausage engineer. But Sputnikov summer sausage doesn't sound too bad. So this medical form had information about my eyesight, which was quite poor by the time I finished high school. It started going downhill about when I was 12. It was getting worse and worse, and that's why I had to wear those ugly, horrible birth control glasses that I always joke about. And I said my eyesight was so poor that even Soviet military said they're not interested after we went through the medical testing in high school. I was pretty much not good for military service. So when I was submitting my documents in this Institute of Food Processing, modern abbreviation is NUFT, N-U-F-T, National University of Food Technologies. Back then it was called Institute. The lady was accepting the papers. She looked at my medical form, then she checked her files, and she said, "I'm sorry, but we can't accept you. Your eyesight is too poor." So that was quite a shock. I had no idea about this type of limitations. So I asked her, "Can you tell me where can I go with my eyesight?" And she had reference. She looked at all the colleges in Kyiv, because I told her I prefer to stay in Kyiv since I live here and I want to live in the dorms. She said, "Well, the only option is a Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, and there's only 2 faculties that have no limits for the eyesight. It's you can be engineer of welding or engineer of electronics." And of course, I was shocked. How come with my poor eyesight, they thought it's totally okay to deal with welding? So those were my 2 choices if I wanted to stay in Kyiv, is to be engineer of electronics if I'll be accepted, or engineer of welding. Either professions I had zero interest, but of course electronics sounded better than welding, so that's how I in the end became engineer of electronics. So I took my papers and I had to write a new заявление, a new acceptance letter now to Kyiv Polytechnical Institute, that I would love to become engineer of electronics, and the next stage was entry tests. Вступительные экзамены. Okay, I also need to mention that besides medical form, they also would look at your diploma. So we had so-called average grade. So if you remember, we had 5 is excellent, 4 is good, 3 is acceptable, and 2 is failure. So your diploma will have usually grades only 3, 4, or 5. And if you have all the subjects added together, then divide by amount of subjects, you get your average grade. And that was an important number, because if your average grade in your high school diploma is too low, they will tell you, "Sorry, we're not interested. Your average is too low even to try to get accepted, try entry tests." Okay, just to give you an idea, this is the look of my school diplomas. The one on the left is incomplete school education, and the one on the right is complete middle education, and they in both Russian and Ukrainian language. And we have a Ukrainian coat of arms. That's the Soviet era one. Okay, so here's my grades. Ukrainian language 4, Ukrainian literature 4. Now 5 is excellent, 4 is good, 3 in satisfactory, as I mentioned earlier. Then we got Russian language 4, Russian literature 5. Oh, what's the next one? Oh, this is algebra and beginning of analysis 4, geometry 4, the basics of computer science 5, history of Soviet Union 5, general history 5. Обществоведение is like about communism, socialism, capitalism 5. Geography 5, biology 5, physics 5, astronomy 5, chemistry 4, foreign language, which is English 5, labor education 4, military training 4, physical education 4. And my total score, average score, is 4.52. So not bad, but not great either. Okay, my friends, I think it's a good spot to stop right here. In my next video, I'll talk about entry exams, entry tests, and I will answer any questions that you have. Please post them in the comment section. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, don't forget to like it, share with your friends, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.